So let me get you caught up to speed. So a 25-game Olympic winning streak goes up in smoke for the U.S. It is finito, done, over with. It ends on Sunday when France lost to France. France closes the game. The last 18 points, they scored 16 of the last 18, 16-2 run, and they beat the Americans 83-76 in the Tokyo Games. And a longtime NBA player, currently he was on the Celtics at the end of last year, was traded over from Orlando, Evan Fournier, hit a three-pointer off a broken play, just under a minute left, and that put France ahead for good. And USA crumbled down the stretch. The Americans missed 22 of 32 three balls. They shot 31% from downtown, and some of those were wide open. A lot of them appeared to be wide open on my television, unless my TV's broken. And overall, the guys from the United States shot 36% against that lockdown defense from France. Wow. How low can you go? Now, there are two comments that stood out in the post-mortem from the U.S. loss to France on the basketball court. We call them the money quotes. The first came from Evan Fournier, who declared of the American team, which is clearly a top-notch team in terms of name brand value, and Evan Fournier said that they are better individually of Team USA, but they can be beaten as a team. Shots fired. Next up, you have Dame Lillard, who also unloaded on the court and off. He was just 3 of 10 floor against France with 4 turnovers and only 11 points for Damian Lillard in the loss. And then he had a comment which was telling as well, which was another money quote. Damian Lillard said, they, meaning the players from France, are completely different when they play for their countries. Talking about all the Olympics in general in that quote. He said of the international NBA players. So he said they are completely different when they play for their countries. Close quote. All right, so let us discuss the question. What's the big takeaway here from the comment by Evan Fournier and also Dame Lillard? So I've got the crockpot, concrete mix, and Darwinism. And we will lock all of these things together. Now, number one. See, both of these guys had a lot to say by saying very little. They were small quotes, but they were telling quotes. And you've got to listen between the words. You've got to listen between the words. Now, we have our super secret decoder ring. We have our decoder ring here. Parsing words is what we did and have done on this case. So it is clear that Evan Fournier is highlighting the synergy that France has. The players globally, just in general, it's a joint effort. While not great individually, when combined, they band together to form a sweet melody on the court. Able to punch above your weight, which is what you're going to have to do if the other team has better individual players. It's not exactly open heart surgery. It's just basketball. It's just basketball. And channeling the words of the immortal legend from the Bronze Age, the Greek philosopher Aristotle, that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That's essentially what was being said here. You put the ingredients into the crock pot, and the finished product, when interfused, tastes better than the ingredients individually. Evan Fournier, he's played almost a decade in the NBA, but he's not an all-star level player. He's played for 3 different teams, mostly the Orlando Magic, and he's put up some stats on bad teams. He's never sniffed the all-star game. He's just a plug-and-play guy. He's not great. He's not terrible. You wouldn't mind having Evan Fournier on your team, but you wouldn't be devastated if he went to another team. He's just kind of another guy. Just another guy in the NBA. Now, the second thing, Dame Lillard, his comments, to me, they resonated. They echoed a similar tone. Although his message was not exactly the same. It was down the same path. Like Evan Fournier was saying, hey, we're not as good as the American players, but if you play together, right, if you form the unit there, they can be beaten if you play as a team. Well, Damian Lillard's comments, his revelation of international players from the NBA, when he said they are completely different when they play for their countries. What does that mean? So I am going to use Ben Logic, Do not attempt this on all. I'm using Ben logic to determine this. So Dame is pointing out that these NBA players that represent the U.S., when they go to the Olympics here, they're not willing to sacrifice. Where the players for other countries are willing to sacrifice the starring headline role, that they adapt to the international style when they're playing for France or Lithuania or whoever. And that's what Lillard was pointing out. You got to be a crafty devil to make it work. And the USA, yes, they've won a lot of games in the international tournament, in the Olympics, and they should win this Olympics, but they're off to a disheartening start here. And it's not at that point yet where they've been willing to sacrifice. And now they should win. They play Iran coming up. And as we pointed out, if they can't beat Iran, they should have to go back to Iran after the game is over. But nothing is guaranteed, right? And you know what happens when you assume. You know what happens, right? You make an ass out of you and me. You can't just roll the ball out there and expect to win. And so it's kind of like concrete mix. Concrete mix by itself is not that big. It's not that impressive. You can't really do much with concrete mix, but you need the water. And when you put the water and mix it all together, it produces a very powerful substance called concrete. But just the mix alone without the water, it's worthless without the water. And you can have all the greatest players in the world, but if the puzzle pieces don't come together, and that's what Lillard was hinting at, it's like, well, these players for the other countries from the NBA, they're willing to adapt, and there's some guys on the USA team that have to be willing to do that, representing your country. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways you can look at this, but in the big picture, the U.S., should they still win? Sure. Does the most talented team always win? No. That doesn't happen. This thing's called upsets that take place. Now, final point. The other issue here is the Zebras. And you can play together as a team if you're the NBA guys playing for the U.S., but the Komodo dragon in the room, you know what it is, right? The headliners in the NBA, what are they accustomed to? Game officials that they have a certain connection with, shall we say. There's the star player in the NBA knows that if a defender even looks at them with the evil eye, whistle. Two shots. NBA rules where stars get touch fouls called against them are the norm. But that's not how it works in the Olympics. It doesn't happen in the international game. They're not in on the ruse like the NBA officials are. So some of these guys, there's a big adjustment, big learning curve, because some of these guys are getting pantsed, exposed without the NBA-style refereeing in their back pocket where any kind of physicality is looked down upon in the modern NBA, and they've grown accustomed to that style, and physicality is a headache. It's a nuisance. It's a massive inconvenience. And so they're going to have to adjust, and you don't have a lot of time to do this. They played a bunch of exhibition games in Vegas, and so they have to adjust to the FIBA rules, and they don't have time to lollygag around. There's also something else which is in the sports context, but it does apply here, Darwinism. And Darwinism states that if you don't adapt to your environment, you will lose. You can say you're going to die, but you'll lose, right? It doesn't matter if you have quicker, stronger, better skilled players across the board. If you do not adapt to the international style of play, then you are doomed. Doom. And remember, the bumper sticker phrase, which does apply here, it's not the size of the dog in the fight. It's the size of the fight in the dog. It's like that college football coach. I want dogs, not cats. I need dogs. And the USA's got to get their inner dog out in these international games. But again, listen, one loss to France. They should come back and win, but you can't assume. You don't roll the ball out, as we said, and ta-da! Going to win. That's not exactly how it works.